All right, thank you for joining us on KHOU 11 Plus. I'm Cheetah Craft, and you know summer vacation is here, and while it's time for all the fun with your little ones, we want to make sure you have the information you need for a safe and enjoyable summer. Joining me today is Dr. Desiree Evans with Texas Children's Pediatrics Palm Center. Now, Dr. Evans, first of all, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And yeah, you know, millions of kids are out for the summer, and it's so much fun, but it's so important that we give families tips on how to stay healthy, because you know how summer is.
Yes.
All of our summer routines, poof, they're out of here. You have kids staying up late, maybe getting up early or sleeping in, and all the different schedules. You know, what's kind of an umbrella idea of how to keep children healthy through the summer?
So one thing is, summer is fun. So make sure you do enjoy that time, have some free time, spend time with your family, because during the year it's the hustle bustle. Kids have activities, we have sports, we have school, we have everything going on. So spend time with your family. Make sure that you guys are having that free time, enjoying time together, but also stay safe. So when you're going to the beach, when you're going outside, make sure everyone wears sunscreen. Sunscreen is for everyone. Also, if you're doing different activities like riding bikes and riding your scooters, put your helmets on. That's super, super important. We want to protect those brains and protect our heads as well. And then also make sure that when you guys are traveling and everything, make sure that you have your vaccines. You know, we're in airports, we're around a lot of different people. People are traveling both nationally and internationally. So you want to make sure that you're vaccinated and make sure that all your family members are vaccinated and that your vaccines are up to date.
Yes, of course. And I want to dive into a little bit more of that, because I know there's, you know, such a heightened response right now to vaccines and measles and all of that. You know, but for the start of summer, you know, you can, I feel like you think of the flu in the winter or common cold here and there. You know, what are ways families can prevent kind of the summer cold or the summer sickness?
So I think the best way is, number one, go to your family doctor. You know, make sure that you're seeing your pediatrician on a regular basis. We love to see you. Texas Children's has over 65 practices, and we have a lot of pediatricians, and we want to see you. Especially over the summertime, it's great to see how your school year went and what you're doing for the summer and what your plans are. So make sure you go into your pediatrician, you know, talk to them about your vaccinations, talk to them about any sports injuries and how to prevent them as well. Also talking about what things do you need to do in order to stay safe when you're traveling. You know, maybe you need to mask up at some point, making sure you're hand washing really well, using your hand sanitizer. You know, those are really important things. Just the basics are really important for us to know.
I know, you know, I always feel like we want to think, okay, when you travel, it's easy to catch the common cold. It's really easy to come down with something. But I have noticed that just those easy preventable, like wipe around your area, make sure you're washing your hands maybe before and after you get on a plane, or, you know, taking that trip, because you're right, it's like the small things, they really add up, and then they don't take down your family. Okay, so let's say you're staying in town, and we both know how hot Houston gets. It's the heat index, you know, sometimes that feels like temperatures well into the triple digits, and kids want to be outside, like you said, bike, swim, the beach. Let's talk about maybe the signs of potential heat-related illnesses in kids, because we often think of adults with that, or I do, but with those kiddos wanting to spend so much more time outside, do you have any tips for that?
Yes, it's really important. So we want to be in the sun, we want to be in the heat, but make sure there's some type of shade. Always make sure that you guys have water or something for the kids to drink. Water is probably the best thing that you can have. And then make them take breaks. We know we want to be in the pool, we want to be in the water, we want to be hanging out in the sun. Make sure that they take breaks at least every few hours or every few minutes even. You know, just stop, take a break, come in the shade, drink some water, and watch them. If you start to see that they look more fatigued, they look more tired, they start to look very flushed, they start to move very slowly, you know, think about, are they getting overheated? Are they getting heat exhaustion? You know, take them in, make sure they get in a shade, drink more water, and just take a break.
Yeah, you know, you want to think that, you know, we all get used to it, but you know, you're right. It's, you know, taking those breaks and cooling your body core, I know it can make a big difference. And even if you don't see that completely, just kind of implementing that throughout the day. Now, you touched base on water. I want to talk about this because, you know, some kids love water, but some kids, of course, want to, you know, what do you feel between water and maybe sports drinks, juices? You know, how is that interchangeable? Is it, you know, how How can
I
we best
think-
practice?
I think water, number one, that's the best thing you can use to hydrate. You know, especially for our athletes, sometimes you do need some of the sports drinks just to rehydrate yourself. But I think the best thing you can do is water. And remember, you want to start hydrating even before you go outside, before you start playing, before you start doing your games and things like that. Because if you hydrate your body to begin with, you'll give your body at least that push, and you give your body at least that first step so that you don't get dehydrated.
Yeah.
And so if you start off with a little bit of extra, it helps you to kind of get through the rest of the time.
Right.
But if you start off and you haven't been drinking, it actually makes it way more difficult for you to kind of catch up later.
Yeah.
So it's really important that on a regular basis that you're drinking water. That's the best thing that you can always drink. Your body always needs water.
I know, and especially in our heat. Have you found maybe a packet or a drink that kids have liked that you can put in water? You know, a lot of people do those liquid hydration, but I know it has a lot of sugar. Have you heard or seen anything that you've seen that kids will go to?
So, you know, kids love like little juice boxes, some of the IV hydration, things like that. I think you have to find what works best for you, but again, you know, always check the sugar content. We really don't want a lot of sugar for kids. You know, juices, they're okay, but water.
I know.
Definitely no sodas. You know, water is the best thing that they can do.
I know, every time my kids see the Gatorade or the Powerade, I'm like, come on, give me a half a cup of water and
Exactly,
then I'll mix it in. I do my
Yes.
own little mixture there. You know, are there any activities that come to mind that parents should just, you know, try to avoid outside that,
I think all activities within reason can be safe. You know, firstly, swimming. I always encourage my patients to, number one, take swim lessons. Start from a young baby and encourage them to learn how to swim, because at young ages you can learn water safety, learn pool safety. That's really important. And also know your limitations, even as they grow and they're teenagers who are very good swimmers. Some of my kids are athletes and they're on swim teams, but know your limitations. Swimming in a swimming pool is very different from swimming in the ocean and in, you know, the waters, like, you know, so you have to be very careful. Always make sure that you have somebody that's with you. Swim with a partner. Try not to swim alone. Try not to go at dark hours where people can't see you. So things like that are very, very important. Always make sure that when you have your child in a pool or in water, that you are paying just direct attention to that child. Try not to be on any type of devices. Try not to be distracted. You want to, because drowning can happen in a matter of seconds. So you want to make sure that you're paying direct attention to that child. Even for your teenagers, you never know what's going on. So you want to make sure that you guys are paying attention and enjoying yourselves, but still being safe about it.
Oh, 100%. And I've noticed, you know, especially in fun gatherings, sometimes with family and friends, you think there are so many adults around that it's kind of like nobody's paying attention to the specific kids. So you're right. Sometimes I think having kind of the plan, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and then it's really fun.
I always recommend for families to have somebody, like, almost have a schedule. So we're watching the kids from, you know, 10 to 11. You're going to watch them from 11 to 12. And so that way you always have an adult's eyes on the children that can always watch them. And even if you have pool parties, a good idea is always to hire a lifeguard. You know, have that lifeguard there so that if the adults want to have a good time, that's great, but then you always have somebody that's watching the children and that's keeping everybody safe.
Oh, I love that. I know I've had a few friends do that at their house, and I'm always so thankful. It just takes like the extra edge off of worry. But you know, everybody loves to swim when it's so hot, so it's just so important to be extra prepared. You know, outdoor activities. You know, when it's really, really hot, with high UV exposure, is there anything that you would say limit? I know you're saying kind of everything in moderation, but is there anything that comes to mind that you've heard of that can lead to either more injury prone or potentially heat illness?
So I think just staying outside for long periods of time, but also making sure that, you know, wear your sunscreen.
Right.
When you're in the heat, when you're outside, make sure you put sunscreen on. Sunscreen is for everyone. And you want to make sure that from the young infants all the way to the elderly that we all wear sunscreen.
I know.
You know, that's very important. You know, wearing your helmets, super important as well when you're on the bikes and everything. Also being careful around traffic. You know, when you guys are riding your bikes and your scooters and things like that, you want to really try to ride in places where there's not a lot of cars, not a lot of traffic. Really pay attention to stop signs and things like that as well.
Okay,
So.
I want to get your input on this. So a lot of times, you know, kids who are entering 5th, 6th, 7th, you know, whatever families start to feel comfortable with talking about the bike. And it's a big discussion of like, when is the right time to let your kid, you know, go through the neighborhood? Have you given any tips to families in that regard?
I always tell families, you know, I think you have to judge based on your child and their maturity, but I always say I'm not a huge fan of them riding by themselves necessarily, always ride in groups. You know, if you want to go somewhere, go with a friend, go with a group of kids, because that way each one of them is watching out for the other person. You know, only go by yourself if, say, you have to, or they're riding to the friend's home, but really try to stay in groups. It's funner in groups. It's much more enjoyable when you're not by yourself, when you're with your friends. So.
It's so much more fun. It's hard because kids always want to feel like they want some type of independence, and so it's a challenge both ways. So, you know, now that summer's out, we're talking about the fun of it, but also sometimes summer, because kids can become a little bit more isolated sometimes. You know, even I think children at a younger age than we may even think. We may think, but I know probably in your profession you hear a lot more. What about the mental health for children, you know, even younger and maybe even into middle school and so on?
That's so important. I always talk to families about, number one, you know, have time when, even if you're working and they're at home, when you come home, have no screen time for a little bit. Just sit and talk with your child. How was your day? What were you doing? What would you like to do today? Let's do something fun together as a family. So that's the first thing. Second thing is try to do activities with your child, but also where they're experiencing, you know, with other kids. The library is a great place. It's cool, especially in this Houston heat, but it's a lot of times the activities are free or very, very inexpensive. Plus they have lots and lots of programs that they can go to. Even for the younger kids, they can read, kids can check out books, they get to meet new friends. You know, there's always tons of camps throughout Houston. Some of them are paid, but some of them are very inexpensive, and even some are free. Going to the park is also a great place. We have some wonderful parks in Houston, and a lot of them have water, which is what we need.
Yes, exactly.
In this Houston heat. So there's lots of different activities that you can do, but I think the most important thing as a parent is, you know, we tell our kids to get off the screen, we have to get off the screen. And we need to look at them and watch them and pay attention to them. Get to know your kids' friends, their friends for your kids, and know who they are, who they're hanging out with. You know, pay attention to if your child seems a little bit more isolated, say, hey, let's go to dinner. Hey, let's go walk around. Let's go for a walk. Let's go, you know, go to the library. Let's do something together just to pull them out of that, you know.
Yes, and you know, you were talking about, you know, a library or parks. I've also noticed with my own kids, even if you go to one of those areas without a buddy, sometimes you find new friends there, and you know, they can be really positive influences, maybe even outside of the typical circle you're around. And I know some of our local libraries, they'll even offer activities inside the library. The parks, you can kind of get reconnected, maybe see some flyers or some information. So I agree, that I think that's a great outreach. Okay, you said this, and it's so hard because it's summer, and you know, families just have, you know, all the time in the world to fill with the kids. You know, we all try to do cams, but it's like the days that you don't. And screen time. Screen time. So do you have any guidelines for parents to say, hey, this is the amount of time that we recommend, or what to watch, that kind of thing?
So, especially for our younger children, we really do not recommend screen time. You know, I know sometimes we just can't help it. We're busy. If you are going to have them on the screen, try to limit it to 30 minutes and try to do educational
And when you say young, let's talk about the ages, just so.
So for our infants, a lot of times people put infants on there, kids younger than a year, Really try not to have them on the screen. I know sometimes when you're sitting in the office or you have appointments, you have to, but make it educational. Nothing more than 30 minutes. Even for our older kids, nothing more than 1 to 2 hours. You know, you really want to limit what they're on. If they're reading a book, if they're watching movies and things like that, but really try to stay off of social media. It's really not good because, again, we all know, we feel like, oh, I'm looking at this person and what they're doing, but we want them to see the real world and the real life and experience things. And so, and that actually helps to build their mental state, you know, when they're seeing the real world versus what's on the screen, which may or may not be real, that makes it more difficult. So truly try to limit that time. And I know it's difficult sometimes, but try to give them other things. Again, getting books. The other thing I recommend to families to do is get some workbooks. And sometimes just doing 1 page of workbook a day, or 2 pages a day, and just different subjects, it just keeps their mind going. It keeps them in tune with school, and so they don't completely lose everything that they learned that school year. And a lot of times, most of the bookstores and things like that will have the discounted workbooks for the kids, so they can get them and you can have them for the incoming grade level and so forth.
And it's hard, trust me, I have 2 little ones, and I would love them to do workbooks just all day long, so I get that it's hard, but it is is, so important. And as far as, as adults, I feel like we know that all that we see online, YouTube and on social media, we know a lot of that is not real. But it's hard, even I think for teenagers, and then of course much younger, for them to understand that's not everybody's real life. That's not the right. So, talking about that, what have you seen with maybe either too much screen time or on social media, some of the impacts that it can have on children?
We see it quite a bit. Unfortunately, for a lot of our kids, they feel like, oh, I'm not as pretty as this person, or I'm not doing as much as this person, or I'm not as good as this person. And again, as a parent, you can talk to them, have those open conversations with your kids, like, hey, people put a lot of things on screen for you to see, but you may not be seeing the real world or their real life. And so discuss that with them, and have that open conversation with them, like, yeah, this may look great, but sometimes behind the scenes is not what's really going on. And so you want to let your kids know. And the other thing you can always continue to do is tell your kids how wonderful they are. Tell them how amazing they are. Like, just because this person's doing this, you are still great in your own skin. You are doing amazing things in your own skin. And so I always tell parents, affirmations are amazing. One thing I've heard parents do, and one parent actually taught me, whenever I drop my son off in the car, I'm say, do great, be great, because you are great. And so
I love
you
that.
say that every single day. At some point, that kid remembers, okay, I'm great. My mom told me I'm great. And so when you continue to tell your kids and really pour into them those positive things, they will always remember that, no matter the hard times or the things that they're going through. My mom and my dad said, I'm great. Okay, I'm great. I can do this.
Oh, I love that. And that also gives them kind of a level to live up to as well. It's like, okay, if I am great, and they believe in me, then I need to act that way all the time.
And you notice whenever you say that, the child's chest just kind of, it opens up like, okay, I can do this.
Yes, I am. I love that. I think we all need that. You're right about that. We need to do that. With talking about, telling a child how great they are, what they're aspiring and every day to be. Have you seen though anything that parents can do? I know you're saying affirmations. Any more tips to help parents continue to encourage better mental health, the environment that they're in, with kids, I guess, of all ages?
Yes.
But I know sometimes that middle school area is really hard.
Middle school is tough.
Yeah.
I see that with all of my patients. A lot of it is, continuing to talk to them.
Right.
Figuring out who are their friends,
right?
Who are they hanging around? Who are they, spending more time with? Because again, they think you're not cool at this age anymore.
I know, you're
right. Encouraging them to hang around friends that are positive for them. Encouraging them to get into activities. Not every child is an athlete, but get into different activities. If they love acting, if they love playing chess, there's amazing chess clubs and different clubs throughout a lot of the schools. So encourage them to participate in these different clubs, and you'd be surprised at the things that will actually grow from that. There's some kids that go on to be amazing chess champions.
Yes.
Some kids that go on to just be spelling bee champions.
Yes.
So just encourage them to follow what they enjoy.
You know what? I have done that too, even with my own kids. Even Googling, let's say, like different art or things maybe outside of what they typically do. I do feel like summer is kind of that branch where maybe that's not your normal school year routine, or maybe that's not what your child typically does. But it's a way to say, hey, okay, let's see if maybe you would enjoy this or that. And speaking of camps, what are signs parents should look out for if they're concerned their child? Okay, so back to mental health. What their child is struggling for. What are those signs?
So a lot of them, if they become almost like a recluse, they don't want to leave their rooms. They really don't want to talk. They're not eating much or eating with the family. That's one thing that if you try to have dinner as a family or meals as a family, that helps you to kind of almost force the kids to spend time with you. But if they're not doing that, if you start to see that they want to be on their phone, checking to see what they're watching on their phones. Your pediatrician, though, is an amazing source. Most times at our physicals, we are actually assessing their mental health, and we talk about it openly with the children and with our families, because we want to know that besides just your physical health, your mental health is super important. So when you notice that your child seems to not be themselves, seems more sad, not wanting to interact, not wanting to spend time with you or their friends, let that be that red flag. Don't wait until it gets too far to say, oh, I don't want to bother my pediatrician. That's what we're here for. We want you to come to us so that way we can help you before it gets worse, before it gets too bad, before it gets to a point that, we have to do something drastic. So please, come to us. anything and everything is on the table. We talk about everything. That's what we're here for.
Right.
We're not just the doctor for the physical, but we're the doctor for the mental. We are part of your family. We want to make sure that you guys are continuing to be healthy, both mentally, emotionally, and socially.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes those conversations are so hard as a parent, and sometimes they can become awkward. They're just so difficult. And sometimes I think, you know, even if it's not comfortable with the relationship, even if it's your own child, because maybe the kid just feels like it's too personal or something they have to hide, to have the source as your pediatrician, someone they've trusted, someone they know. Have you found that maybe a child can tell you or open up? Yeah.
I love that. Remember that your pediatrician is the other adult
Right.
in their life, and it is a trusted adult. And there are many times where they may not feel comfortable speaking to you as a parent, but there's ways that we can talk to them and they will open up in an amazing way. And I've had lots of kids tell me stuff that the parents were surprised and didn't even know about.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times we actually will have kids fill out questionnaires. So it's not even that I'm asking them to talk to me, but they'll answer the questionnaire in a way that they want me to ask them. And so that is that door. They're
Yeah.
leaving that crack open because they want help, but they too are not sure how to ask for it.
Right.
And so as pediatricians, we're there to kind of be that other adult that is a safe adult, that is somebody who cares about them deeply, and we want what's best for them as well.
Oh, I love that because I think sometimes, you know, as parents, we want to always think that we know everything about our kids. And sometimes it's kind of hard to take almost that ego or that chip off your shoulder as a parent to think like, no, I know the best, but to really have a trusted source with your doctor who can kind of also, you know, talk about things in different ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's community. Remember,
It's
you know,
community,
being
yeah.
a parent, as a parent of 2 young boys, it is hard.
Oh,
you
yeah.
cannot do it by yourself. And so you have to make sure you have that community. And so your pediatrician is part of that community. We are that other source that you can come to. And truly, I tell my patients all the time, we will talk about anything and everything. Don't ever feel that you will be judged in here. This is a no judgment zone. And parents, we need you, you
Yep.
need us.
And, oh,
we
yes.
do this together.
I learned
because-
very quickly to listen to the experts, to take the advice, and it makes everyone grow from that. Okay, thank you for all of that. Now we're gonna.
Remember, I also want to tell parents, remember to, you know your child better than anybody,
Right.
you know, and that's so important. And so you may not necessarily know what's going on, but you have a sense that something's going on.
Right.
And so just come to us and say, I don't know what's up, but help me figure it out. And so that's what we're here for too, to help you figure it out as well. And we do this together.
You know, and the good thing about summer is there is time.
There is
you know,
time.
you're not on such a structured schedule like you are during the year where you have to be at said place, said time, and things just stack up really quickly and it can be overwhelming. At least summer, you know, hopefully can be a time where maybe we can reevaluate and get some help with community. I love that. Okay, so kids that are going off to camp, you know, what are ways to still keep kids active and engaged through summer camps? You know, what are some camps that you've seen that parents have seen their kids thrive from? Or is there something that, you know, kind of opens the door maybe to some new energy with kids?
There's a lot of camps that are throughout both the state and also throughout the nation.
Yes.
You know, I'm actually learning about more and more camps as my kids get older. There's immersive camps for Spanish languages, Spanish and French and different languages. Those are amazing. There are some camps that are, some of them have religious base, I think, depending on what your choice is, and those can be really good for kids just to build up their whatever your belief is. But it also gives them different activities. There's camps for art. There's camps for science. Lots of STEM camps, which are excellent. If your child is a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout, there are amazing camps for them as well that will build their stamina and just their love for the outdoor and nature as well. So there's a lot of camps that are available.
And I think that can really help with self-esteem too. It can help with confidence heading back into school. I think they'll have more stories to share.
Yes.
I've also noticed that sometimes local camps, or maybe even some camps like you're saying across the state, you know, the pricing is also different. That sometimes, you know, if you just do kind of an extra little layer of digging, a few extra clicks, you can kind define one that maybe is a little more budget friendly, but also adds maybe something a little different. Because sometimes it's fun to be with buddies, or I found with my kids that sometimes it's fun to be in their circle, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's fun to meet new.
To meet new
and
kids.
have new experiences.
Yes. My kids, I actually kind of pushed them to go to sleepaway camp last year. Initially, they were upset, but when we got back to pick them up, they were eager for me to sign them up for the following year.
See,
so
how
they're
amazing.
Going back this year. They didn't go with anybody that they knew, and at first they were like, "We cannot believe you're sending us. What are you doing?" And then when we went to pick them up, they were like, "Make sure you sign us up for next year."
I love
and they
it.
were super excited. So you'd be surprised, like just putting them in a different arena, how excited they are and how much fun they'll have. And they still talk about camp to this day.
Oh my God!
So,
See, I love that, and they're coming back with maybe even different skills, or new ideas that we wouldn't have had either inside the home, or maybe around what their normal day to day is, especially because it's a new environment. Let's talk about that though, from a health and safety idea. Sometimes the idea of like sending your kids to either an away camp or maybe even just being gone for the day. Sometimes that's new for parents as well. Is there some tips on how to handle maybe that new transition?
It is. So firstly, do your research. I know you were speaking about the cost of the camps. A lot of camps, number one, will have scholarships, and they also do have funding for parents sometimes if they feel like the amount is a little bit much. So that's the first thing. Ask around. You'd be surprised the number of families who have gone to camps. As I started talking about the camp that I sent my kids to, I found out more and more parents who had sent their kids to the camp. Find out what the communication style is for the camps. How, can you call and just check on your child? Will they send you pictures or photos of your child to let you know that they're okay? Are all the camp counselors, are they vetted?
Right.
Are they background checked? Do they go through training? So those are things that you want to know. And do your research. Has there been any issues or any history both legally and medically with these camps? Have there been any issues? So you can definitely do your research and find out what's going on, and follow your gut as a parent. If you see this and you're like, this doesn't quite feel good, follow that gut.
100%.
Move on. There's a whole bunch of other camps that are out there, and so I was very nervous as a parent to send my child to sleepaway camp. I had never done it before, and I was like, is this the right thing?
Now, what age did you?
There were 12 and 14.
12 and 14.
So
okay,
it was a while. It
that
was
is.
a while. And I was a little nervous, and I will tell you that I packed everything, and when I picked up my youngest, he had on night clothes, and he said he ran out of clothes, and I knew that he didn't, but
there you are.
That's what happens. He still had clothes on. So
they figured it out.
They figured it out.
It's all part of growing up. But let's say a kid who has, let's say, asthma or serious allergies. And you may worry about their independence of kind of staying on top of that. Do you have any tips for that?
So yes, my oldest has asthma and he has allergies. So I was that parent who typed everything out. And you make sure you send everything with them. It's very easy. I love Ziploc bag is my favorite. Of
course.
You put all their medications in a Ziploc bag. Make sure that their name is on there. Make sure that the medications are not expired. And for the parent like me, I typed out everything so that they knew exactly what they were getting and how they were getting it. But it's really helpful for them as well.
Right.
And so I also talk to my kids. Since they're older, when you need your allergy medicine. When you may need your EpiPen. When you need to use your inhaler. So just type those things out. Most of the camps, probably close to 99% will have some type of medical personnel that's there. And what was reassuring to me was there was a nurse practitioner that I dropped off the information to, and so we discussed it. And so it felt to me like they cared about what was going on, what was important, and to make sure that my child was safe.
Of course.
And so that was very important to me.
Okay, maybe if families are watching and they're not sending the kids to sleepaway camp, but they're here in Houston and they're still dealing with asthma, allergies. I was saying how we think of flu or let's say in the winter months. In the summer, is there something that families should be more prepared for?
They actually should. So unfortunately, because we don't have the best ozone all the time, we do still see asthma exacerbations. We do still see a lot of allergies. We're still seeing the flu, a lot of illnesses. So number one, going to your doctor, making sure that you're having regular checkups with your pediatrician, keeping your asthma action plan up to date. So that way, if they become ill, what do you do? How do you manage that? Do we maybe need to change the medications or adjust the medications? Knowing what to give give at what time and when and why. So those are important. And the other thing is also talking to your child about that.
Right.
As they get older, let them know, like, if this hurts you, let me know. Or if you're running nose or sneezing, tell me, Mom, I think I may need my allergy medicine.
Right.
It's interesting how
us.
kids will start to learn their bodies and understand what's going on. And so letting them know and making them a really integral part of their health care. So that's also important.
You know, I've learned how, mold can be sometimes really high, of course, during the summer months, and how that can still play a role with, let's say, kids who need an inhaler. Maybe they aren't typically like asthma, kids who use an inhaler all the time. Is there a time where you say, hey, if you notice, signs of either eczema or allergies, I mean, this is when, maybe even outside of a pediatrician, maybe there's the allergist, because in Houston it can be so bad.
Really
the
bad.
allergies can be awful.
Yes.
Is there a layer kind of in your mind that families could look out for during the summer months?
There definitely is. So I always tell my families, your pediatrician's of course the first line, and so you start with them, but then if you're recurrently having issues, and we've tried to manage it with medications and different interventions, then that may be the time for you to move up to the next specialist. And Texas Children's has lots of specialists. We have allergists that are amazing. We have pulmonary physicians that are amazing. And so there may be a time that you need to go to the specialist to make sure that you get it better under control. The other thing is also a lot of your pediatrician's offices can help you if you are living in an environment that may have mold. How do you address that? Either with your landlord or with the city. There's ways for you to manage that, because no family should have to live in that type of environment. So there are ways that we can manage that. A lot of our clinics have social workers who are wonderful that can help us kind of navigate through that and manage how to help the family so that they do live in a healthier environment.
Right, kind of going down to the root cause of it, the reason. Sometimes it's like the humidity and so much of the rain that we pick up for the summer months. And, I know just even cleanliness of washing your bed sheets maybe once a week, which is so much work, but it does limit, I know, the mold or the potential of mites in the allergens in each room. We've been talking about travel and maybe the impacts on families. Some families are really starting to be more concerned about shots and measles. Can you share some of your thoughts about that? Either, of course in Texas, but maybe traveling outside. What can families do to maybe lower, their worry of
So I think
that?
the most important thing is get your vaccinations. The vaccines are there. We know they work. As they've said before, we really didn't see measles a lot, and now we're starting to see the resurgence because I think some families are choosing not to vaccinate. And so the beauty, though, that we do know is that the vaccines work. So make sure that your children are caught up with their vaccines, get their physicals over the summer so that the pediatrician can make sure that they have their measles, mumps, rubella vaccines, they have their diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis vaccines, they have their polio vaccines, especially if you're traveling internationally. So those things are very important. Again, masking, depending on where you're going. Some families may feel like they need to wear a mask when they're traveling. If you're going to be in environments where there's lots of people, very crowded, it's okay to wear a mask. It's okay to do that. Also having your hand sanitizer, having your wipes, wiping down the areas like we talked about in the airplanes, and just your areas overall, and hand washing. You can never, ever, ever forget hand washing, because those are very important. Trying to have places where you're outside and not, together in this really tightly packed areas. That makes a difference. So try to have open areas outside, being out in the open makes a difference.
Yeah, and those visits and vaccines, I think this summer, especially when you're not in this locked-in schedule, make the appointments, make the time. I know we're doing that with our family too. Yeah. And now we're talking about just the start of summer, but Dr. Evans, I'm going to bring you almost already to think about back to school for your children, especially if it means getting important tasks out of the way ahead of time, so you don't have to worry about that once everything moves back into school mode. What can parents do now for the start of next year, which seems like forever, but you know how summer, it'll go fast. So is there anything you would say kind of families could do so they're not just, going crazy right when school comes back?
Definitely go ahead and get your physicals. Get your physicals so the kids get their vaccines. And remember, ask your pediatrician to get their sports physicals. A lot of these kids will need their sports physicals so that you're not rushing in to get them right before the sports and right before the year starts. And so come on in. We're open, we're available, we're ready. We want to do their physicals, so we have time now. So that's the first thing. Also, the second thing is I know the kids want to stay up all night and hang out and have a great time. Try to let them enjoy that, but then as school gets closer, really try to hone in on their bedtime. Having them go to bed a little bit earlier each day, so that way they're not super tired and they're used to it. So then you're not having to fight with them 1 week before,
of course,
saying you've got to go to bed, you've got to go to bed, you know, and they
do.
don't want to.
Oh, I know.
They don't want to. Also, try to stay on a healthy diet. You know, we want to enjoy the ice cream and things like that, but really try to continue fruits and vegetables and eating a pretty healthy diet throughout the summer, so that way when the school year comes, you don't feel like you have to get them back on track into eating things that are more healthy and, you know, getting on a regular regimen. Also making sure that the kids are, you know, kind of staying organized. You know, that helps them to kind of get ready for the school year. The one thing I love for kids to do is when they finish the one school year, focus on what they did great and then think about what goals they want to set for the next school year.
Okay.
And so if they kind of think about that, and it just has to be 1, 2, or 3 different things, and nothing big, but like, say, I'd like to make sure that I'm finishing my homework on time, or I like to make sure that I turn everything in on time, or I'd like to make sure that I, you know, get a better grade in this class, you know, but at least work to do better.
Of course.
You know, if they set those goals and kind of work towards that, it makes it so much easier when the school year comes, because then they're like, okay, I think I'm ready. I don't have to think about everything right now in a week or a couple of days.
And that's when it gets overwhelming. You know, right when you're doing these big things in a short period of time, and even during the summer, like you said, if you think about those goals and maybe kind of ways to tackle those, it'll help to kind of ease you back in. You know, I know have been seeing patients at Texas Children's. You know, how long can patients see you as a pediatrician? How long?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask that, because I love to keep my patients for a very long time, but typically about 18, and in some cases 21, especially for some of our chronic kids. We will keep them till 21 just because we want to make sure that the transition is good and that it's a safe transition for them and that they feel very comfortable. I have been known to see some of my college kids, because
I love that.
I want to see them. I want to know how they're doing.
But you know their history.
Exactly.
I love
and
that.
it's comfortable and it's safe for them. And one thing that I love is when they start to make their own appointments without their parents. For us, I feel like that is a win.
Wow.
We told them, you know, we've talked to them about making sure you go and get your checkups. But when they come in on their own, it just warms my heart, because that means you're taking your health important and you can do it on your own and you're growing up.
And I love that, because if you're seeing patients even through that age and they have that trust and they know you so well, I love the fact that they'd also have guidance even through those tough years. All of those tough years that you really need somebody else that you can always go to and trust. Oh, I love that. I haven't even thought of that, of children making their own appointments.
It's wonderful.
That's amazing.
And I love to see them. And it's interesting how the conversation changes about different things.
Oh, I bet.
You know, we'll talk about safety, like they're enjoying life and they're in college and they're partying, but then we'll be like, okay, be safe and make sure you're doing this. Remember, we got to finish college.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
But the conversation changes, but it's an enjoyable conversation, because these are the kids who would not take their clothes off, or, you know, to get their physicals, or would not get shots, or didn't want to do certain things, and now they're like, hey, Dr. Evans, great to see you. And they're coming in on their own and they're asking me questions and they're having conversations.
But see, that does show the trust, the maturity, and I just love that you see the years. That's really interesting. 18 to 21. I haven't not thought about that, even with my own children. But I know what is also a stressful time. So we're thinking of the 18 to 21-year-olds, you know, parents who have just had a kid and they are trying to find their pediatrician. You know, what are things that they should think about or maybe look for in a pediatrician?
So I say ask your community, ask your friends, ask your family. I think for me, the biggest honor is that I take care of families. I see the aunt and their child, I see the cousin and their child, the sister and their child. And so ask your family, ask your community is the first thing. Talk to your OB. A lot of times the OBs will know, oh, I've referred patients to this pediatrician, I've had really good feedback, the families like them. Also take the time and go visit the pediatrician. We love to see families in our office. We want to show you what we have, show you what's available, because this is going to be your medical home. And so we want to bring you into where we are and see what we have available. But, you know, always, and not every pediatrician's for every family, but you will find your pediatrician. You will find that person that you feel comfortable with, that you want to help you in this journey with raising your child.
And it's so important.
Very.
You know, I know that convenience isn't always like a number one, because I know people who, you know, love their doctor, will travel to wherever, but I do think sometimes, especially with young kids, it is nice when it is semi-convenient to your area, just because it makes it a little bit easier to kind of get to on those situations. You know, and then lastly, I know you work with many patients who have autism, and I think that that is such a special group, but finding sometimes the fit with those patients of camps, or maybe what fits best for their summer. You know, do you have any tips for parents that have children with autism of, you know, of maybe what their summer will look like?
So for the parents, there are some programs that are available for kids with autism. What I do tell the parents is you need to go visit the programs. There are some programs that are available, but you really need to go visit them.
Yeah.
Every program for children with autism is not for every child.
Okay.
You know, certain programs are great for kids who are more verbal, then there are certain programs for kids who are nonverbal. And remember, for kids with autism, they will also feel what's good for them. You know, watch how your child reacts when they enter the environment. If they're comfortable, if they seem like they want to explore different areas, that's always a really good sign. If they tend to shriek to themselves, want to hold on to you, it may not be a comfortable environment. It doesn't mean that it's a bad environment.
Right.
It just may not be the environment for them. Especially for families, for kids with autism, you are their biggest advocate, you know, and so it is okay to ask the questions. It is okay to find out what things are like for them, you know, and be there sometimes, even just to kind of monitor how they're reacting in the environment. Ask them, say, when I drop my child off, can I stay for a little bit? You know, maybe in the background, just to see how they interact or how they react with my child. And I think that's okay. Because,
of course.
you know, especially for a child who can't communicate, you always want to make sure that they're safe.
Of course.
You know, for our children who can communicate, we want to make sure that they're safe. But especially for our children who cannot, we want to make sure that they're safe and they're in a safe environment for people that will really protect them.
You know, and then looking to their pediatrician, you know, is there something that you would recommend for maybe how a family with a child that has autism, how they would feel comfortable? Or is there any other tips that you would give families to find that right doctor?
So definitely ask the physician if they're comfortable with kids with autism.
Okay.
You know, sometimes some pediatricians are more comfortable than others. The beauty of Texas Children's has an amazing autism center. The developmental behavioral pediatricians there are absolutely phenomenal, and they train us as general pediatricians. They typically do trainings with us, you know, weekly and monthly, just to help us to become more comfortable with taking care of kids with autism. So make sure that your pediatrician is comfortable. That's the first thing. There's tons of resources that are out there. You know, the developmental behavioral pediatricians have lots of resources. They have an amazing group that provides resources for our families. So make sure that your pediatrician knows how to access them and access those resources. There's so much that's available for them. And have a pediatrician that's willing to sit and take the time with you. It takes time. And so every single visit we'll talk about, well, Mom, have we done this? Have you set up for camps? Have you set up for childcare? What about the schools? You know, are you comfortable with the situation with the schools? Do you feel like the ABA program is a good fit for them? And so discussing these different things with them and knowing what to expect, you know, and then telling the parent, okay, if this doesn't work, just come back to us. It's okay.
I love that. Yeah.
You know, because again, sometimes it takes a little bit before we find a good fit.
Right.
And I tell my parents of patients with autism that all the time. Sometimes the first thing doesn't work, the second thing may not work, but then the third may be a charm.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if people are watching right now, how can they get in touch with you?
So we are on the Texas Children's website.
Okay.
So texaschildrenspediatrics.org, and you can always you can Google us. You can look for our pediatricians. Again, we have over 65 practices. We are affiliated with Texas Children's Hospital, which is, I'd like to say, the best children's hospital in the country.
I do too. I know it is, if not the best, one of, definitely. Yes. That's for sure. I know. Well, thank you so much. I know our family has been in and out, and we've just had, you know, a wonderful time. We've met the best experts there. And Dr. Desiree Evans, thank you so much for joining us here with Texas Children's and giving us all the tools we need to have that healthy and happy summer. And thanks to all of you at home for joining us for this conversation. We've got a lot of original content ready for you, so including more discussions just like the one we had. Be sure to watch those for free right here on KHOU 11+. Thank you again.
Thank you.